You're listening to the Tomorrow Society podcast. Hey there, thanks for joining me here on the Tomorrow Society podcast. It's been way too long since I've talked with you. This is Dan Heaton, and one of the reasons I like doing this podcast so much is getting to talk with smart people who are really into theme parks. It's essentially like just going to a bar, sitting there, and chatting about what's happening at Disney, what could be happening, and what we want to see happen. And that's what happened today, really, with my conversation with Chad Emerson. He was on the show last year. We talked about, his background with theme parks, his book, Project FutureOur. And this time we really just spent about an hour going through what's happening at Disney, what's happening at all four parks, how Universal's coming into it. And I think it worked out really great. So I'm excited for you guys to hear this conversation because I think it's one of the better things I've done so far. And don't forget, if you like this podcast, I'd love for you to rate the podcast on iTunes, leave a review, and you can always check out what I'm doing at tomorrowsociety.com. But I'm going to stop talking because I want to get into this conversation. So here it is. Here comes my conversation with Chad Emerson. All right. Well, I am thrilled to welcome back an expert, in my opinion, on the world of theme parks. He writes the Large Park News column for Tourist Attractions and Parks magazine. He's the author of the book Project FutureOur about the origins of Disney World. It is Chad Emerson. Chad, thanks for coming back on the show.
Dan, it's great to be back. It's been, a couple of years now, maybe 3 years. And when I did the podcast the first time, lots of really strong fan feedback. So I know people are listening.
Yeah, it's been a few years, but it's been a little while, but I know that people liked it and it was really fun to talk with you. So I figured now would be a good time because it's been a very interesting, especially past year with what's going on with Disney. I figure we could talk about Disney and their competition and, some hints that maybe they're struggling a bit, but it's not going to be negative. There's fun things coming on the horizon. So let's dive right into it. Like I said, it's been an interesting year right up front. And I think the big story, there's two big stories. Let's start with one is the continued push. We're talking mostly Orlando, but it also is in California from Universal. And, this year they opened Kong, which has generally gotten pretty good reviews. They've got several rides in Volcano Bay next year. So on your end, like, how far can this go? I mean, I know we've got Star Wars and things coming, but in the next few years, how much of a dent can Universal make?
So you mentioned Star Wars. Star Wars needs to be a huge hit for Disney. The reason it needs to be a huge hit is because they finally have a competitor who can compete for them almost dollar to dollar, and that's Comcast. You might recall Comcast actually tried to buy Disney a while back, and Stephen Burke and all of the folks at Comcast were not successful, but they were convinced that they needed to diversify from a cable operator into a content provider. And right now, Comcast is, I think it's fair to say, they're spending just as much dollar for dollar in Central Florida and to a lesser degree in California as Disney parent company. And that has changed the paradigm. People are going to Central Florida on a Universal vacation and visiting Disney versus going on a Disney vacation and visiting Universal. And that's really, honestly, Dan, the first time that's happened since both parks operated.
So yeah, and it's a great thing in a sense because in theory it should lead, we're going to see it, I'm sure. Both of them, as long as Comcast maintains ownership and keeps pushing, which I think they will in the near future, it's going to continue to push both sides to do that. And like you mentioned, I mean, a big factor, at least to me, I think, is that now Universal is adding hotels. So as opposed to being a day place or a place where for the few hotels they had, they're starting to build themselves out as more of a resort that people can go and stay at with Cabana Bay, and now even more recently with Sapphire Falls.
It's almost like Universal and Comcast dusted off the Eisner playbook from the mid 1980s and said that worked brilliantly. We have to get people coming to our resort. We have to get them, and I think you're going to have big news soon about the convenience from getting from Orlando International to Universal, something akin to Magical Express. You're seeing the water park. You're seeing the fact that if I want to take my family, or you want to take your family or friends, you could now, for the first time, really spend 4 or 5 days on property once Volcano Bay gets open. 4 or 5 days on property at Universal and not felt like you missed anything as part of your vacation.
Yeah, and in particular, if you're somebody that goes fairly, not like 10 times a year, but let's say once a year, this year in particular, there haven't been that many new things. And even we'll see next year, depending on when Pandora opens, there haven't been that many new things at Disney. So again, that when Star Wars comes, there's going to be more of a push, and maybe even Toy Story to a lesser extent. But we're in this weird kind of middle time when Universal has a chance to push ahead because Disney's building these larger expansions.
Yeah, I mean to credit Universal's timing, they filled that gap you were talking about where Disney was not investing in major big capital projects, and the one they had announced was basically a retrofit of Fantasyland, which was nice, and Seven Dwarfs is a fun ride, but ultimately it was kind of updating things that existed. Pandora comes along, and I've on the record, a lot of both written word and spoken word, that it may surprise me, but can you name a single character from Avatar? Can a typical person, and the answer is usually no. They're like, well, that's a blue person. It's really cool. It did a huge movie revenue, but the fact is that was their play into Harry Potter. And you're playing into these iconic characters like Harry Potter, and you're playing with Avatar, which I don't think anyone can name more than 3 characters. So here's the question. Avatar could exceed expectations. It could be fantastic. But really, people make an emotional connection with characters. Can Star Wars, coming soon in the next 2 or 3 years, can it fill that gap that Harry Potter really opened the door for people to rethink their Central Florida vacation?
Yeah, and that's a good question because you mentioned the 80s and Eisner, and I think even his Disney decade in the 90s, where it seemed like I went as a kid and when I was a teenager and stuff, every time you went, there was new things, and they didn't have 4 parks then, but 2 parks or 3 parks. And it was really tough, once you kind of get that ball rolling, even if someone else, like Islands of Adventure opened, great park, but it didn't do very well because the ball had rolled so far in the other direction. So I don't think we're in that exact case here because Disney has so much of a legacy. But if Disney ends up, let's say, because you've noticed this year, things just either they aren't open, like Rivers of Light, they're not opening really, or Frozen, they open, they're not ready. I mean, is there a case where Pandora gets pushed back and all of a sudden we're in 2020 and Star Wars isn't open, and they've had 4 or 5 years where things are going the wrong way? I mean, can Star Wars save that?
I think Disney has such a mammoth built-in advantage of people who've been going there. I mean, not a lot of people grew up going to Universal on spring break when they were, teenagers. Now,
Right.
Universal's flipping that switch, and they're giving a compelling reason. Disney's question is, how long can it keep the reputational value going without producing new product? Now, in last April, I went down to Disney for the press event for, among other things, Rivers of Light and the Tree of Life at night. The Tree of Life at night, stunning. It's one of the more stunning things I've seen. I think it's more stunning than even the castle I've ever seen. But it is still, you don't go to a park for the last 15 minutes of the park. Just like you don't go for wishes, you don't go for illuminations. Now, you may be there, but that's not why you go. Rivers of Light, a great potential, beautiful. We saw a small snippet at the press event. That small snippet, which was clearly incomplete, was overwhelmingly awesome. But you don't go to the park at 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or 7, depending on time of year, to see the last show. You have to get things to draw you in there. And so Universal was smart. They rolled the dice. They put Potter in both parks. They invested in a big way, really created the train that goes between two parks. And then they filled in with extra things like Kong and other projects. Disney needs to hit a home run with Star Wars. And frankly, if they don't, the paradigm changes. I have a sense, though, that they do.
Yeah, I think they will. And that's even like I had very low hopes for Frozen Ever After, and I haven't ridden it. But from what I've seen, when it works, I think the Imagineers did a better job retrofitting an old ride system with low capacity so they can still do it. It's just a matter of, I think they got, more than a few years ago, they were caught a bit sleeping and didn't really believe things would go the way they went. And now they're kind of having to catch up. And in this, I think they'll get there, but then the question becomes, where do they go once they get Star Wars, which is 2 attractions and a land? I hope beyond that, and in that park and others, they have, I'm sure they do, but they have plans in the interim and then after, especially, to keep it rolling, because that's what Universal did well, is they didn't stop with Hogsmeade. Now they opened in Hollywood. They seem like they're keeping pushing forward, and that's where Disney, after New Fantasyland, I felt like took a little break, and you got to keep it every year right now in this industry.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Universal kind of did it backwards. They did the big creative push with the original Potter world and Islands of Adventure, and then they backfilled with Cabana and now Sapphire and Volcano Bay, and even little things like the putt-putt course right there at City Walk.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not a big deal, but it's things that make it sticky, make it hard to leave. You get there and you're like, man, I'm already here. Do I take the effort to go down I-4 for 15 miles, or hey, maybe we'll do putt-putt and Margaritaville today? And so the thing about Disney, though, is that Star Wars has so much potential, and I think, frankly, Dan, it's not just the main series. I think what you're going to find is with Rogue One coming out this Christmas season, if that hits like people think. I mean, I've heard a lot of people in the industry who I talk to from the entertainment side, the creative side, say that Rogue One, wouldn't it be something if that storyline overwhelms the main storyline, now that you're seeing Han dead and Luke vaguely involved or whatever? Rogue One, I mean, does Disney say is we're going to go with the mainline Star Wars attraction that everyone knows from the 1970s onward, or do we go Rogue One? If Disney goes Rogue One at Disney World, I think there could be major positive consequences, or if they play it safe and just go with the traditional storyline, which they've had, from Star Tours to Jedi Academy. I think Rogue One presents them the biggest creative opportunity that Disney's had in easily the last decade and a half.
And that's so interesting because, in a way, that movie, if it's not that good, will still make a lot of money on its own. But if it's good, like we sort of saw with The Force Awakens, but that you knew was going to hit. But if it's good and it looks good from the previews, and then they're making, it also leads into the other kind of prequel movies they want to make. If the quality is high and people really grab onto them, the sky's the limit in so many different ways. I mean, the merchandise, but even at the theme parks, who knows?
One of the things that, and like I said, I've been a skeptic, not a critic, but a skeptic of Avatar. There is precedence for movies that you don't make a big emotional connection with, or areas that don't really have an emotional connection at all, to doing well. There's not a lot of examples of truly unique characters. Here's what Avatar could do. It could do a Expedition Everest type play, right? We vaguely knew the Yeti, but it was a brand new, highly themed area. Avatar can bring in this new. The problem, though, is you're riding this new ride mechanism at Avatar. You're going through this story, and this is really, for a lot of people, the first time they've really been exposed to the storyline. With Potter at Universal and most of Disney, they vaguely knew the story, right? You were experiencing things that you probably saw before. Avatar, people probably saw it, but they don't really remember it. And so that's going to be the interesting approach with Avatar this winter, is can Avatar keep momentum? I mean, Avatar at best is going to be a brilliant segue, and at worst, kind of a boring segue into the Star Wars world of Disney. And so I'm actually more excited to see the Avatar creative results, the rides, the theming, than I have been in a long time at Disney, because there's no backstory to buy into. It's like it has to present itself entirely as a new attraction to most people. I mean, 90% of the people I bet who go to Disney World don't know really anything about Avatar other than it's something to do with blue people in outer space.
Yeah, and I admit I see a lot of movies, but I saw it in the theater. And you said name three characters. I can't name one. And normally I would think I could, and it's not that I hated it. It was an experience to see. But you bring up a good point, because I grew up going to Disney. I mean, obviously some of the rides had connections to the old movies and such, so it wasn't that there was no IP, but there were plenty of attractions that had nothing, especially talking Epcot Center, that had nothing to do with IP. And Expedition Everest to me is almost like the last hurrah. I'm sure that I'm forgetting there's been some smaller attractions and stuff, but as far as a big detailed headliner, and I've grown a lot as far as my feelings on the Animal Kingdom. Whereas once you kind of set aside and say, once you stop thinking of it in terms of how many attractions there are and just kind of enjoy it, and that's where I really hope that they have an opportunity here with Pandora, is if they can create this, especially for nighttime, which didn't work so well this summer, though I've heard great things about the tree, like you mentioned. But if they can create a cool environment that people just want to hang out in, it could be almost based on anything.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in the last maybe 5 to 7 years, and we're talking very Central Florida here, but it does. It drives it's like the Red Sox and the Yankees. They drive the major leagues, right? In the last 5 to 7 years, I've had two really aha moments of being like, oh, wow. One was at the grand opening of the original Potter and Islands of Adventure, when you walked into the village. It wasn't even the ride. The ride's nice. It's fantastic. But walking in there like, whoa, I just walked into a place that was in a book that I read about. That was amazing. The only other really aha moment I had was last April, honestly, the Tree of Life at night. And then it was partly the Rivers of Light. It was so incomplete what they showed us, but really that nighttime, I mean, I was so enthralled. I just literally stood at the press event. You have all these things you can do. I literally stood and looked at that tree probably for 60 minutes, just gazing at it. And it's almost, and so I think they have the building blocks upon which to build. And I think Rivers of Light could be that. There's no previous storyline. I mean, Illuminations is probably your best example, right, Dan? There was really no storyline, and it created so much emotion, right? The parade that preceded it, and then Illuminations, which was just a storytelling device. If Disney can recreate that, I will personally go to Epcot just to stay around for Illuminations. I don't think that's the typical thing, but the reality is that I think the ability to go see the Tree of Life and Rivers of Light has so much more potential that any non-IP entity can do. It's original in its most beautiful sense.
Yeah, and that's why it's a little disappointing to me that they weren't able to kind of. I mean, I know they have the Jungle Book show that I've heard mixed things about, but that they weren't able to really nail Rivers of Light this summer, because I'm sure when Pandora comes back, I expect that their hours, they'll be open at night, and they'll get their act together, and Rivers of Light will be amazing. But it would have been nice if they could have nailed it this year, and what you saw could have been expanded, and the nighttime Animal Kingdom was really a hit, because they also added a new restaurant and a new bar, which I've heard good things about Tiffin's, the restaurant.
Yep.
So they're really trying. I feel like that park, as far as if you get beyond the Magic Kingdom, which, But of the three other parks at this point, that park I can really see the potential. And I'm like, they're not that far from that being as much beyond the Magic Kingdom as the destination within the next year or two. And that, I would not have said that 3 or 4 years ago.
The biggest proof that Universal is starting to get Disney's attention in Central Florida, maybe rattle their creative cages a little bit, is the fact that they probably, you're right, prematurely introduced some of these components, especially River of Lights, which when it's done in its full vision will be amazing. It may still take, I mean, I'm told it could be another 12 months until it's completely, so many factors, that world of color in California, from the humidity and the winds to here, did not translate well. It's basically an Animal Kingdom version of World of Color.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. They rushed that out. I mean, literally in front of, and here I'm a little reporter from, Tourist Attraction Parks Magazine. They rushed out from the international media to just get a snippet because they could feel footsteps on I-4. I mean, they could feel, it wasn't catastrophic, but people making reservations for 2 nights instead of 4, or for 3 nights instead of 5. And they're like, I wonder if vacations are shrinking or people are then going over to Cabana Bay for 2 nights.
Yeah, and that I think that also relates to Frozen because they didn't do a soft open, and from what I've heard, if they, you do a soft open for a month or two. Kong had a very long soft open, it seemed like, where it was hit or miss, but it didn't get the same negative attention as far as, because Frozen, because they had a grand opening, granted that came right after, or that was around the time when Orlando had the shooting and stuff, so they didn't really make a huge deal there, understandably so. It's been a weird summer for them overall, but it seems like they rushed that out too. And unfortunately, when you look, it's almost like we know that things are going to get there. But if you look kind of the year, plus early in the year when they had all the price increases, which came, it wasn't always what they were doing, but the announcements came so fast. It's unfortunately, I've seen mainstream media stories, not, places just out to take a shot at Disney, are much more kind of looking closer and being a little tougher on them than I feel like they used to be.
Yeah, I think Disney went through probably in the last 3 to 5 years what I would call the techno Disney phase, where so much of their efforts and really capital investment was put onto My Magic Band and all these other things, which will pay long-term dividends in terms of streamlining and simplifying the vacation. I know they had a lot of feedback that people are like, okay, I have to do this, how can I just streamline it? But Techno Disney was not a creative endeavor. It was a customer service. It was streamlining it. And so they really focused a lot of their attention on Techno Disney World. And I think they might have lost track of the fact that people would rather have an ounce of creativity than a pound of technology, I think. I remember going over to Old Man Island at Dixie Landings, whatever it's called now, Port Orleans. And you go there and you walk through Old Man Island and you're just marveled at the level of detail to basically a resort pool, right? And that's where I think Disney has a advantage that Universal could never catch up to. Universal, you can see it from I-4, you can hear it from I-4. You go to a neighborhood across the street. I mean, there are people that living literally across the street from Sapphire. There's not the space. There's not the escapism. If Disney can take advantage of the fact that they have so many things that they can theme and so many levels of detail, they get the big stuff like Star Wars right. But then I think Disney springs. I'm personally disappointed that they went with some of the kind of the SDK Morimoto. That's great, but you can find that in Vegas. You can find that in Miami. I will say I think it's the Hangar Club, or I can't remember, with all the nods to the Adventurers Club. Like, that's the level of detail. You look at those things, and again, 90% of the people don't get them, but then the bartenders are really trained to say, hey, remember this, and maybe even slip a kungaloosh into you. I mean, that's the level of detail that Disney have, because they have 20 20,000, originally 27, but now probably 18 to 20,000 acres. Universal has a fourth of that.
Right. And that's the thing is like we went earlier this year in January with my girls who were young, 7 and 3, and we stayed at the Animal Kingdom Lodge, and we went to Magic Kingdom and Epcot and stuff. And the thing they talk about the most is the hotel, because the details there are just insane, and it's kind of similar to what you mentioned where we don't need every ounce of the park to look like that. But they're you want there to be kind of a little more of that. And that's another thing too, where I feel like Star Wars is going to be great. We've got the Toy Story Land. I hope it's a little better than off the shelf. I think it might be. But it would be nice if they slotted in, I guess I would call them complimentary attractions, or even some of the Future World Epcot attractions. You don't have to bring Guardians of the Galaxy. There are ways they can make those better and use detail and creativity just to make them not be like so behind the times. And that's the kind of emphasis that I hope we can see more of, and that Universal pushes them to do.
I have a really good friend, and he's worked with Imagineers. He's worked with Disney creative people on, just about all levels. And he went recently, and, when I was there in April, I mean, you have a very tight schedule. You see things, you don't get a chance to explore around, but he went to the Polynesian, and I've not been there, so I'm not vouching for this, but he went, I think it's called Trader Jack's or Trader
Sam's, yeah.
Trader Sam's. And he
Right.
went there, and I said, well, wasn't that just kind of that food court area and all that? He's like, it used to be that area. He goes, Trader Sam's, Chad, is Disney operating at its highest creative level, because it's taken an area which is otherwise just a kind of a benign area, and creating an experience. And he goes, as people trickle down on listservs and Facebook pages and discussion boards, people will continue to hear about Trader Sam's and how amazing it is and how you need to check out this. And I think that's what Disney can do. They need the big moonshots that are relatable, Star Wars, Rogue One, but they have the ability to continue to refine areas and bring the highest lever. So I should know the name, but Hangar in
it's Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar, I think is what
Hangar
you're
Bar. That's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And so in the former Pleasure Island area, that is a great example. Trader Sam's, it sounds like that's a great example that they can do these things that don't cause people to go to Disney because of those, but when they get there, it makes it stickier. They said, that's an experience I can't replicate at Six Flags or at Cedar Fair's parks, or really to a large degree at Universal's. And so that stickiness of the fine level of grain that Disney has is something that right now Comcast cannot compete with. But if Disney's not careful, it'll leave the door open to things like that.
Yeah, and I think what you describe is also kind of how Epcot, I mean, I've always loved Future World, but Epcot's really survived on that kind of feeling that's in World Showcase. And the festivals like the Food and Wine Festival and Illuminations especially, but it's all kind of roped together. I mean, I've gone there before, like you said. I've walked around World Showcase, had a beer, had a snack, watched Illuminations, and you feel like that's great. You're not really riding rides, and that's still something they have. But it would sure be nice to add to that day. I mean, there's a few things. There's things I like in Future World. They just added the new Soarin', which I haven't ridden yet, but they're still doing things. But they need to find. You don't have to just add one $300 million attraction, but there are ways to use smaller amounts and add things. And especially if they're going to keep raising prices, people are going to have higher expectations.
Yeah, I think there will be a price barrier, and if you get to a price level that people start saying, wow, this really hurts more than normal, maybe I'll try something different. And the different doesn't have to be cheaper. They'll be like, if I'm going to go to Disney this year, not a lot has changed since I was there last year, 6 months ago, or 9 months, 12, 15, whatever it is. But the price has gone up a little bit. Let's do this. Let's fly into Orlando International. Let's get a cab or however we get. Let's do 2 nights at Cabana Bay. let's explore that because the price hurts over there a little bit. If it's going to hurt a little bit, let's try something new. And I think it's not like Disney can undercut Universal, but I mean, even with front of the line passes and all that kind of stuff, I mean, I think Disney's really in a danger point. They can't make it too complicated for the average person to make the decisions. I have a dear friend from here in Huntsville. They're trying to get down there, and their ability to book one of the 4 restaurants I want to go to for an entire week in mid-October, which is normally not a huge time, they can't get it. And they can't really get on a waiting list, or they can't get on some sense of, oh, here's another option. It's just like, I'm sorry, that's full. And they're like, well, that's not a good enough answer. We will go someplace else then. If it's full, can you at least say we'll put you on a waiting list and there's some hope there? Or we'll redirect you and say, hey, you know what? I know you haven't thought of this restaurant at Resort Blank, but why don't you go over there and they have a special 10% off? Unless all of the restaurants are completely full, which if they are, and it is what it is. But I mean, these people are trying to spend money at Disney for a unique dining experience, and it's so jammed up that I can't believe that they can't create more of those experiences that people want.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing because my brother recently went, and he went with me as a kid all the time, but tried to take his son, and me having to explain FastPass Plus and ADRs and all those things over it was really hard because it's kind of more ingrained in my head. But when you try to explain it to somebody who knows the parks but doesn't know the system, it comes off like I'm trying to teach them a very complicated class or something. And while the benefits to, especially I found the Magic Bands, we didn't use them to pay for everything, but there were benefits to those. It's not that everything's terrible. FastPass Plus, if used correctly, can give you benefits. But when you're charging so much, and the idea is a vacation, let's say a family takes one vacation in a year, one in 2 years, and they're spending thousands of dollars, they can easily do. They do have to be really careful. And I wonder, I don't know, there's the price question, because we have seen there's a lot of factors in the fact that attendance they announced at their last quarterly call, attendance had gone down, profits have gone up, but I don't want to read too much into that, but with things like with South America, with the Brexit situation, there's a lot of factors that could be impacting it. But from what I've heard this summer, it has not been very busy, and people are wondering when they have their next call what it's going to signify. How much of a factor should we say, assuming that attendance is down for the year, that price is playing? Is it just weird factors and it's kind of a course correction, or is price really, have they hit that point?
It was really interesting because you would think in October, going kind of back to that analogy, and the thing I've heard is that the restaurants continue to be so hard to get into, even at I mean, there are people who are wishing their Disney Vacation Club just get a little bit early chance on some of the restaurants that are DVC and all that. It's like there's this anomaly. It's like attendance is not great. They're squeezing more money out of the people that do come. But again, people with a ride, you're never told, no, you can't get in. It's you have to wait longer and you can make a decision. Some of the key restaurants and some of the things that the kids really still want to see is like Akershus in Norway. It's impossible to get in there unless you are strategically in tuned to how Disney works. You cannot be a casual Disney guest and during any time of the year, unless, I mean, maybe a small window in September, early December, and, not even January anymore with the marathon and all that, it is impossible just to say, I want to go eat with the frozen princesses because my kids are here. I come once every 3 years. I'm from New Jersey. You have to know the strategy, and you get punished for not knowing the strategy. And that's the thing that's going to be really challenging for them is maybe they can't open up 5 more restaurants, but the ability to create, the Hangar or the Trader Sam's, those are more adult oriented. Create the temporary, the quick, fast service, the Panera Bread of Disney World experiences, right? Where you can get in and out, table service, that people who don't come in there and be like, oh, crud, I spent all this money and now I don't know the strategy. There's a golden ticket. I don't know what it is. And now I'm taking my kids to the All-Star, or the Pop Century Food Court because that's all we could get into.
Yeah, and that's especially difficult I mean, it's interesting because if like you said, it's almost like with even though the attendance is down, it's almost like they've lost maybe day guests and casual visitors. And that's interesting though because the situation you present is the type of thing that might make a casual visitor, I hate to say casual, but a non-diehard visitor not come back. So if hotel occupancy isn't as high as it's ever been because I know they did a decent amount of discounts this summer, and but the top experiences are still wrapped up. So then it's almost like you have this circle where the attendance starts going down, people go, they can't do what they want, they don't come back, attendance continues to not go down, and it just keeps happening. Now, I don't think it's that gloomy really, but it's an interesting situation where, and if someone has a bad trip, Disney may not totally know for 2 years because when all those people that were going to come back in 2 years come back less or don't, it's not a situation where they immediately know because somebody doesn't buy something next week.
Yeah, if I were Disney, I would spend a large portion of my creative capital on creating fast casual experiences that had a level of immersiveness that maybe you don't get table service. They don't fill up your water. Maybe you have to do that. But the ability to create those fast casual, which is all the rage now. People are like, huh, I can go to Panera Bread, Chipotle, you name it, and get a pretty good, healthy, well, blah, blah, blah. If they could spend that kind of time on creating a place at the boardwalk, right? Or at downtown Disney, or even inside the parks, where people are like, I'm going to get a unique experience. When I order, it's going to be this screen that I'm interacting with this character rather than a human being who's just, kind of tired to be there. I mean, there's a lot of ways to go with this. If they don't do that, the market will speak. One of the highest grossing per square foot restaurants in all of Disney World is not operated by Disney. It's Earl of Sandwich. And it's because people can get in there no matter how long the line is. They're going to get a relatively interesting, relatively exclusive sandwich. I mean, they have one in, Vegas and other places, but people go there, and it's not but they're going to the lowest common denominator: quick, fast, interesting. Disney can cause them to wait a little bit longer in line. I mean, it's about the queue in the line. Give people the opportunity to go to Akershus. What's the fast casual Akershus where they used to serve the school bread and all that kind of stuff, and that make that level of immersiveness, and you will get people there. But people I know right now are leaving, not going to Disney because they can't get into the dining options they want for the kids.
It's funny that you mentioned Earl's Sandwich because they don't have. I know they're all over in airports and not, but they don't have one nearby here. And we go there every time I go to Disney World. Like
too.
sometimes one trip we went there 3 times. This was when we were staying off site, and we like picked stuff up and took it back, and it's good food, but it's not like the greatest food ever. But it's simple stuff too, like being able to refill your soda and just things like that, where it's like things that you kind of take for granted at your Panera or Chipotle or whatnot that you don't have. I mean, you do have it a few places, but not much. I mean, they've done this a little bit with Be Our Guest, but again, they've run into the same situation where Be Our Guest got so popular, especially at dinner. But I mean, they do the quick service for lunch, and we did that. But it's still, you kind of get that feeling like it's hard to get in, and if you do get in, it's almost too popular to really have that casual feeling you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, Disney does a massive, massive amount of research, so I would never even pretend to doubt their moves based on research. But Morimoto and SDK, and really even going back to Wolfgang Puck's and Gloria Stefan's restaurants in downtown Disney, they were really plays at a very local, centric, maybe Morimoto's like a fancy version of Earl of Sandwich. We don't have one by us, so we go check it out. But it's pretty fantastic to think about how Morimoto, this great restaurant, has been dropped in the middle of Disney World. And when you look back at the history of, people aren't looking for fine cuisine, they're looking for an immersive experience.
Yeah, and I think Disney Springs, I'm glad it's nearly finish because it was a real pain to get through for a little while. But I went there. Unfortunately, not this time, but in January of I think 2015, it was a nightmare. But I think it's a step in the right direction. But I mean, I haven't explored it, so I'm speaking a bit from an outsider. But when you hear things about, I mean, it seems like they kind of took the easy road with some of the shopping, and I'm not a big shopper, but it seems like this weird mix where they kind of got some things right, and then they kind of took the easy road. So I guess it's better than having nothing at Pleasure Island to have things there and to have more you can do. But it does feel like slightly they may have had a wasted opportunity in some senses. But I think it's kind of mixed.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, I think the Paradiso thing was the low point of creativity, right? It was like, what is this thing? Nothing else is open around it. I mean, may or may not have good food. I think even with the kind of the duck boat cars that they have, I mean, oh, it catches your eye, or the some of the other things that's going on. But here's the thing. I mean, I wrote an article in last Tourist Attraction Parks magazine on the micro shop area over where I think it was where Team Mickey used to be. Or they actually
right.
have
Yeah.
these small areas, which really harken back to the original marketplace concept when marketplace was created in the late 70s, early 80s. And it's you can't just get a Mickey candy bar in every one of them. One is a travel thing. So if you're traveling, you get very customized travel stuff. And over here, there's another. And it's that level of detail. And I wrote that article. It was a pure joy to write that article because I didn't need any press releases. I didn't need, commentators. I just wrote the article and I was like, it's the micro shops in the old marketplace where each one of those you walked into and you're like, you kind of smiled. The travel one, they had these destinations to these faux Disney locations, and you could sit in, a chair that was one of the seats in Disney Airlines. And I was like, wow, this is probably in the big picture very small cost, but it's so just fun. It's surprising. And I think that's what the vacationeer wants, to be pleasantly surprised. Don't be blown away every time, but they also don't want to be talked down to with some of these basic, oh, okay, so we have Morimoto here, Morimoto there. But that little surprises. And so when you go into Hangar, when you go into Trader Sam's, or when you go into the micro shops, you're like, that's something that is different from where I came from.
Right, and that's what you want on a vacation. And it's the money is important, but if you can find a place that speaks to someone or makes someone feel like any type of emotion beyond, "Oh, I got to get these kids something to eat, or I got to get a drink or whatever," it's that's a win. And it's hard. That's why it's Disney has done it well now and did it well for a while, and Universal's doing things well. It's not easy. A lot of places. I went to our local Six Flags this summer. Oh my. And they have some good rides, but there's something missing, and it's not easy to do. They're not trying to, well, sometimes they are, but they're trying, but there's just something missing there. So I know, we've been talking for a while, in an instance of time. What I'd like to do is I had planned to kind of dig into each park. We've already kind of done some of that, especially
Yeah.
with Animal Kingdom. But I have a few. Can I ask you like one question about one question about the other three parks? Can we do that
Go
real
for it.
quick?
That's
All
great.
right.
That's great.
All right. So Epcot.
Yep.
Future World, we have heard so many rumors. I'm not asking you to tell me what's going to happen, but Guardians of the Galaxy is coming to Energy. Can it even happen? Or is it going to come to Wonders of Life or Mission Space or whatnot? Just from what do you think? I mean, not as much Guardians, but what are they going to do, especially with that side of Future World? We've got Energy, we've got the Wonders of Life, which is used. Those two and possibly beyond that.
Yeah.
What are they doing over there? What are they going to do at Future World? They may not do it till 2020, but something has to happen, right?
Yeah, I think the redo of Living Seas, when they put in the Nemo and Friends, they reconfigured the ride through, that should have been a bright light for them because they had a couple of those RoboCoaster Kuka arms going through there. And by and large, everything I've heard, knowing two or three people who've actually been senior leaders at Epcot, that was hugely popular. Turtle Talk with Crush, another one. A relatively minor, new attraction, super popular. I think right now Disney might be overthinking the other side of Future World, and they may be thinking like, what's the huge big thing we can do, right? And so living with the land, living seas, even imagination to a degree, all that's kind of taking care of itself. What if they did? What's the next? What's the next? I mean, it's been 10 years, actually more than 10 years since Turtle Talk with Crush. What's the
Hmm.
next Turtle Talk with Crush? What's the next, journey through the living seas with the lights, the cooker? I mean, what can they do with these minor insertions? I think they learned. This is what scares them, Dan. I think they learned with the new test track, they can spend a gazillion dollars and actually get worse feedback. And so it's like they're trying to decide, do we spend a gazillion dollars? What do we do? And so I think I would say is do some turtle talks with Crush, whatever the equivalent for Wonders of Life or Energy is, those minor insertions build up. I mean, again, they didn't change Living Seas much at all with Turtle Talk. It was a one small room there. And then it started to build from there. Instead, they're talking about Wonders of Life, the entire pavilion changing. No, create something compelling that starts generating that buzz, and then you can decide what's worth investing in. I think Epcot, right now, Future World especially, it warrants really, really, really creative small projects rather than semi-creative big projects.
That's a good point because, and that's kind of where Epcot started. And I'm not saying they're going to go back and try and recreate that, but they had these pavilions where you had a ride and then you had shows, and then you could get lost in some of those pavilions for so long. And it's more about, and none of those. I mean, they were expensive at the time, but with Energy, it's this giant building. It's like you could do so many different things with that building without creating a $200 million roller coaster. But I don't know. I guess the thing about it is that's like a proven commodity. I guess you put in a big coaster, you put in even a Tron thing, you're going to get some bang. But like you said with Test Track, I like the new Test Track, but I like it the same as I like the old one pretty much. And I don't think that's what they wanted.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point too. You nailed it spot on. You like it, but you said the old thing, if you didn't spend, 40, $50 million, whatever it was, you liked the same thing. And the same challenge with Mission Space. I mean, and that's how the park, they've done these big gestures because they thought, again, they know their research, they know their customers. I'm not privy to all that, but I was like, I wonder if they're misreading their customers not going over there, because I know Turtle Talk with Crush drove huge audiences. I mean, the return on investment for something like that was one of their best ever. Then they tried to replicate it in other places. It didn't work as well, but like there's something out there. There is an Imagineer or a Disney creative group person who's thinking like, what about this idea? Introduce it at Wonders of Life. I mean, right now it's just a pavilion for food and wine and
Festivals. Yeah.
well, yeah, festivals on it. Introduce it there, gen up some interest, and so I hope Epcot. Here's my thing, Epcot, do a series of small updates. Soarin' in the big picture, its update has been hugely successful. People love it more than New Fantasyland, more than Rivers of Light. And guess what? In the big picture, it was a nominal amount compared to a new attraction. So I would say small gestures of high creative level at Epcot. That's the next big thing.
Yeah. And with Soren, they added that third theater and they added Frozen, and the lines are so much shorter now. That also helps explain people liking it, I think, too. So things like that can make a difference. Okay, Hollywood Studios question.
Ooh.
Will we see? See, here's the optimistic view: Toy Story 2018, Star Wars 2019. Will we see that, or what? Or what year is Star Wars Land going to open? When is that going to happen? That is the big question. And on with it, when is Toy Story open? Because that's probably coming first.
Yeah. Yeah. So Hollywood Studios, which ironically is probably one of my favorite parks. I love the juxtaposition of different things there. It's in a world of hurt, Dan. And the reason it's in a world of hurt is because it is not designed for the capacity that it's trying to induce. And you almost wonder if it could benefit from an Epcot scenario where it has that second entrance or even a California Adventure, right? That second entrance where there was a
Mhm.
lot hotel over there, they have property. Right now, they're going to bring all this demand. But again, talked about Turtle Talk. What was one of the most popular things they've introduced at Hollywood Studios since it was named Hollywood Studios, Jedi Academy? That
Yeah.
little stage show that kids went up there. Again, that shows you that these big dollars aren't necessary if you can grow that. And I mean, I remember going over there. It must have been 4 years ago now with my second oldest son. He's now 12. And he's probably 7 or 8. I was over there, and he took, Darth Maul to task. I mean, he was flying that lightsaber around, and it was so authentic there. And so what I would say with Hollywood Studios is that they're going to be careful. They add all this amazing stuff, like Animal Kingdom. Add the amazing stuff. The parking lot's huge. The bus drop-off area is huge. The ability. I mean, there's so many huge things there. Hollywood Studios. You add all this. Just getting down Hollywood Boulevard could be something that makes people not want to go. And so they
Yeah,
need
and
to be careful there.
I think that why not just, I mean, of course, why not make an entrance? Of course, if you did this, it would be so crazy, but make an entrance that takes you right into Star Wars. I mean, it would be insane trying to get in that way, but something that takes you in between the two. And I also wonder this, I only said I'd ask one question, but this kind of relates is so let's say they add Star Wars, two attractions at the beginning, Toy Story, two attractions, and then you have your restaurants, and Star Wars is probably going to have something great there. It still doesn't feel like that's enough things for how much they took down. Like I feel like given the capacity and everything, it seems like something else has to slide in there. I don't know. Maybe they think that's enough just because of the draw of Star Wars, but I feel like the people have to go somewhere else. So I don't know if it's Pixar or Indy or what. Doesn't it seem like there's still a few more steps before that's like really where that park needs to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think Hollywood is always going to be the most controversial. It's a love or hate park. I love it because of disjointed nature. It's it's not so disjointed that it seems weird like a Six Flags park, but you would go from the movies ride, great movies ride, to all of a sudden you're over here at this like walking through Walt's original world thing, and then oh no, there's a Toy Story ride. And so I think the disjointedness works a little bit. I think their challenge is they don't really have a nighttime show, a regular nighttime show, and they don't really have a place to, like you said, go to dinner and the parents to hang out. And really, if you and your wife decided to go over there, or me and my wife, or just some friends, then we're going to go there. Where are we going to go hang out? I mean, that's what Epcot's really bread and butter is. People come in there and they try different foods, try different drinks, checking out the France show. I think Hollywood is going. They have two entrances. The funny thing is they have two entrances for cars. They have one,
Right.
and I almost feel like you need to put a big parking lot off the what is that? The southernmost entrance, whatever road that is, and says, okay, you come in here, you park right here, you come in here, and we'll have two-sided entrance. A two-sided entrance to Hollywood Studios with all the stuff they're adding could be amazing. And really, honestly, a paved parking lot and another set of glowing Mickey ears that you put your Magic Band on, they can't be that expensive.
Not considering, I mean, what it would do for guest flow and everything. I mean, it seems like it would be worth it. All right, so we're going to finish here with the
Yep.
Magic Kingdom. We haven't talked about the Magic Kingdom really at all, but there's a reason because, in a sense, I wouldn't say it's complete because I think there's little spots they could work on. But in a sense, it draws people. The park functions pretty well. There aren't 3-hour waits because they don't have enough headliners. But so we got Star Wars coming in. We got all these other things at the other parks. We get to 2019, 2020. It may happen sooner, but what is the next place that Disney decides we got to attack? I have a thought. I think I know where it would be if it was me, and I could say, what am I going to pick to focus on? I know where I would pick, but I'm curious. What is the next new fantasy land or area that Disney decides we have to adjust at the Magic Kingdom?
So I'm a big fan of the X-Files, which was when I was growing up. I'm 44 now. That was kind of the thought-provoking series there. And I lost interest in the X-Files when it kind of, what's the term, jumped the shark with Fonzie
Yeah.
and Happy Days. When it got so complicated, I think right now, honestly, all the ideas, all of this stuff that you can do the other three parks, right now, the one park that could actually use the Magic My Band or the Magic Band and the Magic Fast Pass Plus and all these kind of things, the one park that actually could stay as it is and simplify the guest experience through technology is Magic Kingdom. I think they've been surprised at how unimpactful serving alcohol at Be Our Guest has been. I think there's some people who thought it's going to be a huge hit. Some people thought it was going to be a huge detractor. It's just been kind of basic. I think the Speedway, I would personally get rid of the Speedway, and that would be the only place I'd put a new e-ticket. That's a lot of real estate that doesn't have a high throughput, and frankly, doesn't even say Tomorrowland. It's just weird there. I mean, that was Tomorrowland at one point when they built it, but I would say other than the Speedway, getting rid of that, I think right now you need to really refine the edges of that experience, and I would love to see where the original, I think it was Asian or Persian resort was going to be to the west of the Contemporary. Maybe put that there with a special, unique entrance. But beyond that, that's the one park whose capacity and whose attendance and whose favorable ratings doesn't need a major overhaul besides maybe the Speedway. Take the Speedway. That's your one big e-ticket place. Other than that, hold still.
Yeah, I mostly agree. I was thinking Tomorrowland is, I mean, I think it's better than Disneyland's Tomorrowland in terms of some issues there. But the Speedway is a big area, and they could do some tweaks like we talked about at Epcot with Stitch's Great Escape, maybe even with Monsters Inc., and switch some things out there that I think would fit the theme better. But those are smaller switches. But you're right, because they did kind of try as far as refining the edges with Skipper Canteen. They thought, we're going to put in another restaurant that Be Our Guest, is very popular. We're going to put something else in. And when I was there, we didn't end up being there because it was the last day of the trip, and it just was it was a lot of money looking at the menu. But I will say, walking by, I expected it to be like, we'll never get in, because they were doing the no reservations at the time.
Yeah.
They were like begging people to get in there. And this was before they, did the ADRs and changed the menu. But so that, while a great idea, I've heard it's really nice and has interesting food, because, doesn't have the Be Our Guest connection to Beauty and the Beast and stuff, didn't seem to really hit. So I don't know if it's part of its location. You come around the corner and there it is. But it's tricky, because I think they had the right idea, because eating there is still, Magic Kingdom needs more places to eat. But I like your idea of the hotel with the separate entrance, like the Grand Californian for the Magic Kingdom. And you could charge so much money for someone to stay there. It would be almost insane.
And you got, an extra set of, I'm not one of the people who has a problem when Disney charged a premium and you give premium value. I mean, I know people think, oh, okay, everyone, every income level should be able to experience it. But no, that's not the real world, right? And so I think if they created that premium experience, Grand Californian is the model. You had your own entrance. I mean, theoretically, if you weren't staying at the Grand Californian, you could have gone in through there. But, not many people would. I mean, it was more of an exclusive entrance. And, take that. And the beauty is, honestly, Dan, that whole Speedway area, which is the most underutilized, worst per square foot revenue space in all of Magic Kingdom, it's right there. You could make that work right there. You could add in a few things, and I know it's not impossible. I know it's not possible at all because licensing. But if you were to put Pokemon Go on Tom Sawyer Island, you would have break attendance records every year. So
I'm not sure they want that many people on Tom Sawyer Island. I think
people swimming to Tom Sawyer Island.
Oh my gosh, that would be something to see. So I feel like I could ask you for about a half hour on how to, because I feel like you could create an entrance. We won't do that. Don't worry. You could create an entrance there. You don't even need any ticket attraction. You create a cool entrance, and really, I have mixed feelings about the alcohol thing, because World Showcase sometimes does look like almost like a fraternity party sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure I want the Magic Kingdom that way. But if you could find some way, like I think you could create a cool space, like by that entrance, and maybe where maybe you have a nice restaurant and a place where they serve alcohol at night, but it's at a restaurant setting, where you have that entrance and then you have a cool space, and somehow maybe you theme it futuristic or whatnot, but you create kind of this really fun spot right there that kind of draws people to that area, and maybe you don't even need a ride there.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I don't think you need an e-ticket ride. I think you could do something that was really solid and interesting. And, I think just the fact that you could draw people in the other way, again, that's a small portion overall, but the overall, my strategy for Magic Kingdom would be to refine the customer experience. Don't over technology it, but also make sure that it's easy for everyone to have a great view on the parade route. That's a pretty straightforward approach, and I think their leadership now under Dan Cockerell is, I think shares that. I think the customer level experience at Magic Kingdom is getting better, while some of the other parks are more challenged.
Yeah, and I agree. Well, okay. Well, I think we've covered about 1% of what we could cover. But I want to so Chad, are there any projects you're working on right now that you want to mention, or anything else that you're doing in terms of Disney or anything else?
Yeah, so I encourage everyone to subscribe to Tourist Attractions and Parks Magazine, tapmag, tapmag.com. You can get the Large Park Report column there, which I write each issue. And then, of course, Project Future is still selling great, but I think in 2017, there's a really interesting project that I'm working on that really the premise is this, and you're one of the first people I've told about this. What if Walt had lived past 1966? How would have Epcot? So it's almost one of these historical fiction type approaches. So I'm about to undertake that, written the first couple chapters. So what if Walt had lived? What would Epcot in Central Florida look like? So it's going to be a big project, and it's going to be ready for summer 2017 for your reading enjoyment.
Wow, that's I've thought about that. I mean, not writing a book, but I've thought about that topic, and I think it's not even just about Epcot in the city. Walt Disney World and I don't really fall into that, well, Walt wouldn't like this or anything, but just Disney World as it's created would be so different. So I'm really interested in reading that, and especially knowing that, what you know about the history of Disney World.
Coming in summer of 2017, it's going to be awesome.
Excellent. Well, Chad, this was great. Thanks so much for coming on. And when possibly before, but when you're getting that book, that idea going, we'll definitely have you back. And always enjoy talking with you about what's going on with Disney and the other parks.
Thanks, Dan. You have got a great podcast. I've always enjoyed talking with you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that discussion. It was really cool to talk with Chad. We got into a lot of issues that I hadn't even considered that closely in terms of what's happening at Disney World. I think it's going to be fun to see what they do in the next few years, because they're continuing to getting pushed by Universal. So it's going to be really cool to see what, if any, of the things Chad and I discussed actually come to pass the next 3 to 4 years. So if you'd like to get a hold of me, if you have some ideas about the show or just want to offer feedback, you can email me, dan@tomorrowsociety.com. You can always leave comments at tomorrowsociety.com, the website, or on Twitter at tomorrowsoc. And don't forget about those reviews and ratings at iTunes, because those really do help me. Also, the music for this episode was composed by Adam Hookey and performed by the Sophisticated Babies. Thanks so much for listening. I'll talk to you all again really soon.